question I get quite a bit from people is, what is the difference between a Miyuki Duracoat bead and a Toho Permanent Galvanized bead? The answer is they're very similar. So here's the history. Galvanized beads tend to have a metallic type of look to the coating that they use. And in the past, galvanized coatings were not very stable at all. They would wear off really quickly. When I'm talking about in the past, I'm talking about 10 years ago and older. Then the Toho company were the first ones to come out with a stable galvanized bead, and that's where they came up with the permanent label. And so you rarely find those galvanized beads that are not permanent anymore unless they are check galvanized beads. So you want to make sure that if you're buying any check beads that they are not galvanized, because if they are galvanized, that finish will come off, and sometimes while you're still beading the project. Sometimes it'll take a couple of years, but over time that finish will basically, I don't know, it just kind of disappears into the ether, and you end up with basically a clear bead. I have a project that I did, one of my very first ever projects. I wish I'd thought to bring it to show you, that I used a galvanized Miyuki Delica in it. And over time, that Delica became transparent because all of that galvanized coating just disappeared. So for a long time we avoided galvanized. And then Toho came out with the permanent galvanized, and I have had absolutely 100% success with the permanent galvanized from Toho's. I tend to have that kind of acidic skin that will, if it's going to turn the color of a bead, it turns it pretty quickly. And in all my years of using the Toho galvanized, I've never had a single bead turn color on me, either darken or disappear or any of those kinds of things. I will say that I have, in all of my traveling, when I've talked to people about beads, I have had one student who said that her body chemistry did actually turn one of the permanent galvanized. So maybe we'll say almost permanent galvanized, but a lot of it has to do with what conditions it's under, whether, what kind of chemicals are in the air around. For instance, those of you who might sell jewelry into hair salons, all the chemicals in hair salons can really affect bead coatings, just so you know. Also, if you're doing anything with like sterling silver or silver plated findings or whatever, those chemicals in the air can easily turn those things at a much faster rate than normal. So your environment plays a part, your personal skin chemistry plays a part, but they're getting much better at it. Okay, so that Toho Permanent Galvanized, love them, have used them forever. I highly recommend them. Then I'm going to say maybe 4 or 5 years ago, the Miyuki company came in with their own line of more permanent finishes. Then they're calling them the Duracoats. And they have had a recent expansion to the line. There's now well over 100 of the Duracoat colors. They are gorgeous colors. They're really rich and saturated colors that you really totally want to work with. So I have had less time working with the Duracoats. I've had one Duracoat color that I did have a problem with. And right this second, I am forgetting which number it is. It was one of the golds. I think it might be 4202. I will write down in the description below this video, I will tell you which one it was that I had a problem with. So go look in the description field. But any of the other Duracoats, I've not had a problem with any of the finishes coming off. So let me show you kind of a side-by-side compare of what they look like here on my bead board. The beads on this side over here, these guys here, are the Duracoats, the Miyuki Duracoats. These guys are the Toho Permanent Galvanized. So I purposely picked, here are two that are shiny to look next to, and these are two of the mattes. You are going to notice a couple of things. One is that in this is true across the brand, the Miyuki beads are a little bit smaller than the Tohos are. So they're smaller in both the width of the bead, and then also notice how these are done with the identical number of rows. Notice how this one extends farther. So height of the bead is different too. So if I stack these up, it's not a huge difference. It's more of a difference in the non-galvanized and Duracoat, but this does come out a little bit farther here on the Toho and a little bit farther right up here on the Toho. In the regular beads that aren't Duracoat or permanent galvanized, that would be a more pronounced difference. The Tohos are significantly bigger. Same thing here in the matte version. You can see, if you just kind of look at a column, you can see where these are wider. The Tohos are wider than the Miyukis. If I stack these guys up, it's a little more obvious. You get almost a full bead width difference here. This is, I think, 14 across and 20 rows. And then height-wise, it's still not very much of a height-wise difference. Okay, so that just relates to, I think the finishes are great. I love them. I use them a lot. I love these rich saturated colors. One of the downsides of these, both the permanent galvanized and the Duracoats, is that it is a coated bead, meaning that the entire bead is coated. And that means that the holes can sometimes get more blocked up. And so you cannot get quite as many passes of thread through there. So you may have to go down a needle size to get through. In, say you normally use a size 10, you may have to go down to an 11 or a 12 to get the same number of passes of thread through that bead. Likewise, you're also going to come, and this is true of either the Duracoats or the galvanized, permanent galvanized, you will run into some that the hole is just completely blocked up with the coating, so you'll just have to do some culling there. And then the last thing that I will mention here is that sometimes you can get a little bit of a roughness to the bead, and it's really not even something you feel in a finished product. But when I was beading these little samples last night, I don't really feel it on the Miyuki Duracoats. I'm sorry, on the Toho galvanized. I did feel it on a couple of the Miyuki Duracoats. I would say maybe 3 to 5% of the beads. There was just a little bit of a rough patch on the outside of the bead. Now, visually, I don't see it. And I'm having to really kind of work my fingers here to try to feel it within the finished piece itself. So I don't think that you should let that affect your use of it. It doesn't seem to make a difference at all in the actual finished piece. It's just not quite as, probably wasn't tumbled quite as well, so that coating didn't get quite as smooth and rounded. So I love them, and I'm really glad that we have these really great stable finishes, because it's so disappointing when you're working with a bead and that finish starts altering after you've worked on it. The Duracoats, I just added 42 different size 11 colors to our lineup at Jill Wiseman Designs. So we have these gorgeous colors that have just come in. I'm going to add them in the 15s. I'm adding them in the size 8s. And the more that they come out with, the more I'm going to add them, because I think they are really good quality bead. And you should not worry about the quality of one over the other. I think they're equally great. I hope this helps you make your bead selections. I'll see you soon.